Hey, I'm Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and today's question that every home buyer should ask is, what's my timing? And as a home buyer, you need to know what your timeline looks like. And it's essentially going to help dictate the rest of the process. Let me explain. So if you are in a situation where you're moving to the area and you don't have a lease set up, maybe you're on a scouting trip, you're planning to get a new job, let's just say you're working at Amazon, and you know you need to buy a place or you need to rent a place, and maybe you have a short amount of time. Well, that's going to dictate how much compromise you're going to need to make on your purchase, right? If you're set on purchasing, well, you have a short window, and so you can't be as picky. I always have clients do a list, what are your needs, what are your wants or your nice to haves, and then what are your no's, right? What are the things that, no, those are things that I can't live with. You have to decide, what can I live with, what can't I live without? And then you're gonna have your list of items that are more flexible, right? And what I found is the shorter your timeline is, right, the more flexible you need to be on your criteria. And again, it depends on your budget too. Depending on your budget, you might have more or less flexibility, right? If you're looking to buy a $3 million house and that's your budget, well, you're gonna be able to be a lot more picky because there's not as many buyers in your price point, and usually those $3 million houses have all the bells and whistles. But if you have a $600,000 budget or $700,000 budget, you are going to have a little less flexibility, and you might have to compromise on some of the things that you really want. Specifically, if you're from out of the area and you're used to maybe half the price on a house, right? And all of a sudden, man, I'm spending more and I'm getting less. What I found is another area where they need to consider timing is around leases. So if you are currently renting a house in the Seattle area and maybe you have a year left on your lease, you can usually break that lease. And a lot of times it does make sense for people to pay whatever that break lease penalty is and to go ahead and buy, right? Some people are a little more strapped for cash and it's not able to do that, or their lease break is a lot more punitive than other situations. But knowing that timeline that's usually the most common deadline that people will mention. They'll say, well, my lease is up in 6 months, or my lease is up in 4 months, or man, I just signed a new lease. Well, okay, so you might have a greater or less sense of urgency depending on where you're on that time scale, but it does dictate a lot of this process. So somebody with 4 months, typically it takes a couple months, just from experience in today's market, to locate a place that you like, right? Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2, and then it takes another month to close on the property. So we're looking at least a 3-month process. So if you're somebody that says, man, I need to buy a house tomorrow, well, it's going to take at least a month, assuming we find a perfect place today. And I'm working with some clients right now. I met them last week. We found a house that we're working on negotiating. It's not under contract yet, but we're in the process. And that's a quick turnaround, right? We met, house, under contract, closing period, assuming we get under contract, but we're still looking at essentially a month and a half from when we met. Now, that's quick. A lot of times it takes 2, 3, some clients I'm working with now, it's been 5, 6 months. We've been looking for the house. Maybe we made a few offers, we got beat out by a cash offer or something like that, and now we still have that closing period once you get under contract. So just know up front, if you have a greater sense of urgency, you're going to need to be more aggressive with your offers because you don't have the time or can't afford to keep waiting. Now, if you have a contingency plan, maybe for you, you're like, well, I can always just renew my lease. So if you're in that situation and you have a tight timeline, if you don't have a backup plan, well, you're gonna need to be less picky. It's always nice to have a backup plan, but the majority of people that I meet with have made a decision. They wanna buy a house, and that's the plan. There is no backup plan. And so when we get to that spot, your timing was gonna dictate how much flexibility you have with your criteria and how aggressive we need to be moving forward.